Nothing's certain in politics, but professionals know one thing. Subscribing to the Cook Political Report is the right decision in every election cycle.
For more than 4 decades, the Cook Political Report has been providing political professionals with the right analysis to help them invest political capital with confidence.
A deep knowledge of the past, combined with a meticulous, unbiased analysis of the present, produces the most accurate predictions of the future, time and time again.
Because it's all backed by data from every input that decides elections for president, Congress, and governorships.
Subscribers to the Cook Political Report get the clarity they need through smart analysis that you won't get anywhere else.
Like the very latest outlook for every race and access to our analysts. Amy Walter, David Wasserman, Carrie Dan, Jessica Taylor, Aaron Covey, and Matthew Klein.
The Cook Political Report offers
the right analysis,
The right analysis.
The right analysis.
The right analysis.
for getting it right. Go to cookpolitical.com/subscribe. Hello and welcome to The Odd Years. I'm Amy Walter. Rahm Emanuel has held many titles. Congressman from Illinois, DCCC Chairman, Chief of Staff to Barack Obama, Mayor of Chicago, and Ambassador to Japan under President Biden. And these days, well, he doesn't have an official position at the moment, but that's not stopping him from giving some very pointed advice to Democrats on every possible platform. Cable TV political shows, podcasts, late night TV, and different political conferences. So how does he think Democrats should be responding to Trump 2.0? How does the party recover from 2024 and prepare for 2028? What does a successful midterm strategy look like in 2026? And given his own, let's say, active media schedule, what are his own plans for the future? Rahm Emanuel came on to talk to me about all that. We recorded our conversation on Wednesday, May 14th. Rahm Emanuel, hello. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. How are you, Amy?
I am doing great. And you know what? I was thinking back, first time I met you, or really got to know you. It's 2005. You take over the DCCC. And it feels like we're at a full circle moment here.
It's Groundhog Day for you and I.
It is Groundhog Day. Democrats were in the wilderness, can't win presidential elections, tried 3 times, can't win back control of the House. Where are we going? Lots of hand wringing. Here we are again. So talk about that. This moment compared to that moment. What's the same? What's different? Where do you go from here?
Let me start with the similarities.
Yeah.
And they go past '06 in this sense. And I think this is somewhat missed. If you look at 1994, you look at '06, you look at 2010, you look at 2018, when one party controls both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue, there's a paradigm for success for the opposition. I think all those diagnostics exist today. And what I mean by that is you have, as shown yesterday in Omaha Mayoras, you have a very energized Democratic base. 2-to-1 independent swing voters, whatever category you want to use, are rejecting the incumbent party. And the incumbent party is not as energized as the opposition party. And if you look at all the elections from Wisconsin to Omaha to the specials for state rep, state senator in different parts of the country, Republican districts said, Trump won by that diagnostic for what would be considered a wave election. Don't know if the same real estate exists today. All exists. And the Democrats are less about ideological purity test, more about pragmatic, can you win or not win? And that was also true to, it's funny because I saw President Clinton yesterday. That was the the overriding ideological paradigm of 1992. Who can win? Of you guys, who can win? And so I think that exists. Second, and what the Republicans, I think, right now are doing stupidly, with that paradigm, that kind of structure, like on this ethics, like on this tax bill, they are playing the 3 monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I think that, like, on this ethics thing, Trump is determined to take, this is my view, determined to take the plane, like Bush was determined never to fire his Secretary of Defense, Rumsfeld. And that becomes, if I were the Democrats, I would put a bill, judiciary, executive, legislative, single ethics standard, and I would put it on the floor and not once, not twice, as you remember, Amy, you covered this, We did the first kind of web page, the house that Tom DeLay built
Right,
that had,
right.
and it didn't. You guys all thought we were like, what is this? And that was the first time somebody did something. And we had Bob Ney, Duke Cunningham, Mark Foley, and it built to a crescendo. And I think the one thing I can say is this White House has a for sale sign on the front lawn. And as you and I are sitting here, everybody's appropriately focused on the plane that Qatar is giving. But he's negotiating tariff relief with the Chinese, in which his Bitcoin company just took a $300 million investment from a company associated with the Communist Party of China. And it's like business as usual. It's like an alderman in Chicago would be blushing at this.
Well, the alderman wants it in cash. An alderman would never take Bitcoin.
Yeah, so good point. But so that exists. Now, the one other thing that sometimes people do, the Democrats are this, they're not, if you go through the history of midterms with this structure, the Democrats have to be an alternative with some legitimacy like we did with 6 and 06, an agenda. But this is ultimately a referendum on them. 2028 is a choice between the two parties. Right now, it's not about us, it's about them, and we need to keep it there, exactly there.
Okay, so is the focus, though, on corruption the right focus, given that voters seem to have accepted this about Donald Trump? George Bush, they felt differently because he ran as somebody who was the great uniter. He was above this, right?
Compassionate conservative.
Compassionate conservative, all of that. And the upheaval in Congress was considered at that time, it was a big shock to the system, the Abramoff scandal. I feel like voters are so much more cynical now.
Yeah, I don't know. We're 48 hours into the plane. Aren't you a little surprised how this is captured? So I would say to you, yes and no.
Yeah.
And I lean heavier. While I know they have a threshold for Trump and his shamelessness. Remember, this election is going to be decided by independent voters, swing voters in swing districts. And on the 100-day mark, the thing that was most fascinating in the polling wasn't that Trump slid, although it was fascinating. He's at 27% support among independents. That means 2/3 are voting against him, not supporting him, et cetera, and tying the Republicans. And it's very clear they want somebody to pound and step on the brake here to be a counterbalance to him. So while it may not be, and I do think the corruption is going to be a big issue, but it fits within a piece of this. And so I don't think it's the singularity of an issue. I think it's part of that story. And I do think, you're going to look at districts that are, I'm just using this generically, 55% Trump districts or less.
Right.
That real estate is going to be decided both by an energized Democratic base, but ultimately decided by swing independent voters. And if Democrats recruit right, fund right, that is very fertile real estate, given how quickly the Trump and the Republicans have irritated and pissed off swing voters.
All right. So now you can address the other question, though. Again, I don't want to spend all of our time back in 2006, but
Oh, I don't know, Amy. We had such memories for us.
we had such good times. But the argument that Republicans will make, and some Democrats, quite frankly, worry about this, is, hey, look, Democrats were not as disliked, especially by their own constituency. A lot of Democrats don't like Democrats back in 2006 the way they are now. So do Democrats need to get people to fall back in like with them before they ask them to vote for them?
No, in fact, if you go through, again, as I said, if you go through 1994, you go through 2006, you go through 2010, and you go through 2018, no party in opposition that wins that wave election was in net positive real estate. Now, that's a thumbnail of, I could be, you forgot this poll in June of 1994, but they were not in net positive territory or better. And even with that negative today, and this tells you how weird you and I both are, Democrats in a generic today are 2 points up against Republicans. And in some people, you've heard me before about it, it's a do-nothing Democrats. Well, no, this is the rubber stamp Republicans. It's about them. It is the structure of this race is a referendum because they have all the power. They have all the microphones. They have all the gavels. It's on them. And the Congress, though, the Republican Party in Congress is right now scared of Trump, and they're scared of their voters. They're scared of Trump in the primary, and they're scared of their voters in the general election. And the Democrats' legislative strategy, communication strategy, should be about putting them in that vortex between Trump and their electorate. Everything they do, and I'll give you an example to illustrate this point, tease it out. Again, we're dealing now with 435 seats. I haven't looked at the total map, but call it 35 seats, okay? I would have not a budget. I'd have a tax bill that includes Trump's tax on the wealthy, 2.5 million and above, go back up to 39.6, elimination of carried interest, and restore all the health care cuts. And I go right at it. Because if you vote against restoring the health care cuts on Medicaid, on CHIP, and the premium support, you got a great ad. If you vote with the Democrats, you got also the point that Trump's going to be furious because you're going to have taint his big, beautiful bill. And you need to put them, and just the same thing on a ethics legislation that I would have that it touches the Supreme Court, touches the executive branch, touches the legislative branch. Put them in the vortex between loyalty to Trump and loyalty to their district. And remember, in this Congress, you only need 3 to crack. You don't need 35 of them.
Okay. But that doesn't seem like a strategy that Democrats want to take on, right? They're in the minority. So let's talk about that, though. But they're in the minority and they are...
Yeah. That's because Democrats have a bad case of the for reals. They would actually present a full budget. I would not present a full budget. I would present you're not, as I used to say in the caucus when I was calling, you're having a bad case of the for reals. You're actually looking like we're legislating. Our goal is to have a tax and health care bill. We don't have to do all of it.
Right. So don't candidates have to then also, whether this is legislation or not, would you suggest, you're over at DCCC, you have a candidate coming in, you say, look, you got to come out. Yes, you can say, here are all the bad things that Trump Republicans are doing. Here are the things that I would do. They need to come into this, right? You can't just run against Trump, or can you?
No, it's both the gas and the clutch, not the brake. You gotta, in my view, now this gets to the 6 and 06 part. That had the minimum wage, which, by the way, last time it was passed when we did the 6 and 06 and Bush signed it. That had a healthcare piece to it, it had an energy piece to it. I can't remember all 6 and 06. But it had the modicum of an agenda, and that had brought consensus to the Democrats and gave us just clearing the threshold of credibility. You don't have to have everything. Now, I would, in this Congress, if you had a 6 and 26, I would add ethics. You have a bill that has bipartisan consensus. That bill, Amy, is dealing with stock trades by members of Congress.
Yeah, absolutely. The stocks issue is easy.
Take that, add an executive branch, and add a Supreme Court branch. You can't take a private jet by somebody who has a case in front of the court. I would take everything Thomas has done, that Thomas and Alito have done, and put it there and just say we're going to clean it. Listen, the only thing about the 3 branches of government, they have an agreement on corruption. Clean the house. Now, if they vote for it, you're a winner. If they vote against it, you have a winning issue. And again, on the ethics thing, don't have a bad don't have a bad case of the for reals. Now, you should write a bill. It's got to pass muster. But, I really say this as ambassador. I get a $20 gift. I had to fill out an ethics form and sign it, etc. If it was a Croatian sparkling wine, which I'm not selling America out for Croatian sparkling wine. The idea that a lieutenant in the armed forces, a colonel in the armed forces, has a higher ethical standard than the president of the United States, who literally is cash and carry. I get the plane. I can't get over this. The Chinese Communist Party, through a small company, just put $300 million in Donald Trump's Bitcoin business. And we're negotiating tariffs and a trade deal. We're dealing with Japan having an incursion in the Senkaku Islands, Philippines, Vietnam. I've never seen something like this.
And so maybe your point is that, look, a lot of the reason, well, let me ask it more directly.
Okay.
How much of Donald Trump's drop in job approval rating do you think is related to things like this versus just the overall frustration with the state of the economy and the frustration and confusion about this whole tariff situation?
Well, if you look at the 2 vulnerabilities of the party, our vulnerability is we're weak and woke. Their vulnerability is betrayal and stab you in the back. Donald Trump, and I think the weakness comes from a sense of betrayal and being stabbed in the back. While he's making himself wealthy, your family got no relief. Nobody talked about the price of Greenland when he promised relief on the price of groceries. And he's lost focus on that. And I think when you go through the litany, the tariffs, and I'm a little surprised. If you had asked me in November how quickly the American people understand tariffs to inflation, I'd have said this is on a good day, a 6-month educational campaign. The American people got it like that. And kudos to them. I was 100% wrong. Never thought that they would see it that quickly. They saw the tariffs as directly impacting their bottom line. They didn't see it as part of their economic relief. And so I think it's both the policies have resulted in something they don't like, and more importantly, it's contrary to what he advocated. And I do think this car prices will go up, kids will go without less dolls, etc. And he's off getting free $500 million airplanes.
Well, he seemed to acknowledge that.
No, but I think when you say to me, which is it? I think it's they felt like they got a bait and switch here, and nobody likes being the schmuck at the table. Nobody. I don't think your audience needs translation on schmuck, but I can do it. But nobody likes being the schmuck at the table, and the American people think they got led down a primrose path and have now been stabbed in the back, and they're angry about it.
So the fact that the president has now, I think the Washington Post said it was at least 50 times, has scaled back his tariff declarations, and obviously the
Right.
biggest one being China. This suggests that he knows the danger that these tariffs represent. Do you think then that the belief by many, some economists, Democrats, some others, that this economy is destined to hit a really bad place next year may not actually happen because he is going to pull back enough that the economic damage will not be as terrible as some have predicted?
So I'm going to go at this from like 3 angles. One,
Yeah.
in the former post as an ambassador, every foreign government does a psychological profile of the other leader and they update it. They've all looked at these tariffs, at the market reaction, the way the Trump people caved on China, caved on either auto carve-outs, electronic carve-outs, etc. And they're looking at what's going on overseas right now in the Gulf. And they have a profile on him, how easy this is. It's just basically a little flattery press conference, no substance, a lot of air, a lot of basically sizzle with nothing, with no substance. And they know it. All he's looking for is a pop for the news cycle to the next one. And so they've done a psychological piece. They also seen him cave because of the market. And they now know the leverage they have on him and how easy it is to just make him happy and you don't do anything. It's more motion than action. So there's that piece of it. I think on the other piece, the thing that I watch vis-a-vis the tariffs or vis-a-vis consumer confidence is way down. And most importantly, consumer expectations of inflation in the future, the one that the Federal Reserve and everybody else watches, is way up. It's at the highest level now in a decade.
Yeah, that's what I'm very, very curious to watch over these next 3 months.
So consumers see inflation as getting worse, and they think it's getting worse at the worst level in a decade.
Right.
And so to me, I can't tell you a year from now, neither one of us, and I don't even think, I'm not going to project out, but if the economy starts to lose altitude, and we don't know, I'm not interested in an economist's view of a recession, but I am interested in a consumer's view of their pocketbook stress, that things are getting worse and worse, and you see no alleviation, then you have a fertile political environment, let alone a bad economic environment.
Right. And then they also will have this budget reconciliation bill.
Yeah.
I assume we get something passed. The talk right now is before the August recess, but let's say in the fall, got this final bill.
Whenever it happens, yeah.
It happens.
Target rich.
Okay. So again, you're over at the DCCC. You're talking to folks. You say, here are the 3 points you need to make about this bill.
It's healthcare, cuts in Medicaid, cuts in premium support, cuts in children's health insurance. I'd go right after healthcare, make it singular, focus on those things. Here's one story that I think, if I can, on a policy, not just political, Amy, that I think is incredibly relevant. Now, I'm against everything they're doing on Medicaid. And you and I both know 3 weeks ago some of the things they were talking about. The unwritten story or underappreciated story is how healthcare and somebody who was responsible for negotiating the children's health insurance program for Bill Clinton It then reauthorized the second bill that Barack Obama signs into law on his second week, number one day of his second week, and the expansion of both Medicaid. Medicaid used to be a urban poor minority program, and you whispered it under Medicare, hoping nobody knows, because of Obamacare, and you expanded the audience and the recipients. It's now 40% working poor white.
Do they know they're on Medicaid? That when you're on the whatever Illinois it's called, whatever it's called there, like Windy City Care, do they know that that's Medicaid?
That was a whatever you do, Amy, stay away from marketing. Okay. No, here's what let me say this: two things. The Republican members know that their constituents are on it. I can't tell you a survey, but their constituents know, as written by Josh Hawley in the New York Times op-ed this week. They know they're not going to touch it, and they're very gun shy. Healthcare, the Obamacare, and President Clinton's children's health insurance has become a political sandtrap for the Republicans. They have railed against these entitlements. They've railed against these programs. And when they came to the eye, they blinked. And the change in dynamics on healthcare, and specifically Obamacare, and specifically children's health insurance program, and the premium support for your individual policy in the exchanges, that has become a political hand grenade that the Republicans are scared of, that somebody's going to pull the pin on. And now, again, I'm against what they're doing. They're doing other cuts, etc. But when you talked about what they really wanted to do, it's amazing to me how they have, I don't want to say nibble.
No, they've scaled that back. Yes,
dramatically
absolutely.
Out of political fare.
Absolutely. Yes.
That to me has been the underappreciated. So if I was to say, then circle back to your question, I still would go after this, that they did Trump's bidding. And that's why the bill I would advocate for the Democrats to do is take the the tax on anybody earning above 2.5 million, carried interest for all the private equities, etc. Eliminate that, add the tax that Trump advocated for, and eliminate every one of the healthcare cuts. And just say, this is a choice. You can either raise taxes on the wealthy, or you can cut that single father over there who's working. Your call.
Now, Republicans are going to argue, hey, look, we got you more money, fill in the blank average American. You're getting an extra because of the tax cuts that will be permanent. You're going to get this amount of money. You work overtime. Don't worry, you don't have to pay taxes on that. You're getting tips at your job. Great, you don't have to pay taxes on it. That's what we did for you, America.
Yeah. You could have gotten twice as much if we had actually finally taxed the wealthy, the millionaires. But they decided not to tax the millionaires. You could have not just gotten not $500, you could have got $1,000. And the reason they can't afford your $1,000 is because they wanted to make sure Bezos, Elon Musk, and the like all had their tax cuts.
A quick break, and we'll be back with Rahm Emanuel. It might be a political odd year, but here at the Cook Political Report, we're as busy as ever. Over the last few weeks, we've rolled out our race ratings for governors, the House, and the Senate. It's not too early to think about next year's midterms, and we have everything you need to know about these races. But it's only available to Cook Political Report subscribers. So don't wait. Join us. Go to cookpolitical.com/subscribe. Listeners can use the discount code ODD10, that's ODD, the number 10, to save 10% on any subscription. This offer is available only to new subscribers. How do you feel about the term oligarchy and billionaire as being part? I've heard your shtick on the oligarchy thing, but even this about the millionaires and billionaires messaging. Talk about that versus the way you made it right now.
Well, here's the thing. Now, I got elected in Congress in the north side of the city of Chicago, where Dan Rostenkowski was representing Frank Annunzio, and then in the city of Chicago, Bridgeport neighborhoods like down on the southwest side that the Pope came from. In all my times going to L-stops, grocery store, nobody came up to me and said to use the term oligarch, ever. And the idea of politics is to talk and communicate with people, not to make yourself feel good. Now, I know what an oligarch is. I know the term, but the fact is people understand millionaire and billionaire, and that's a more usable term, more conversant term than oligarchs. And this is and I don't criticize, I get the thrust of it, and I agree with the critique, as I just showed you in the tax fight I would do. But if marketing is our business, I don't know, billionaire seems to me and millionaire seems to me is a lot more used term than oligarchs. And so I just think that this is a classic example where the Democrats, I can give you the litany: Latinx, defund the police. They have the death tax. We have the earned income tax credit. Every time we come up with terminology, we don't seem to think about the goal of communication as the foremost.
Well, it seems like what they're trying to do is put the two issues we've been talking about, corruption and taking care of the wealthy at the expense of the working class, into one easy word. And that's what
Yeah,
oligarchy seems to do.
let me say this: Bridgeport in Chicago, Porridge
Yeah.
Park
How would
in
you
Chicago.
explain this? So
Okay,
go and tell them the story without using the word oligarchy.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and everybody else that was at an inaugural is going to get a tax cut, and you're going to get bupkis. You're going to get zero, nothing, and we're going to cut your health care, so those guys don't have to pay more taxes. And the reason they don't pay the taxes is because they gave him and his business gave his wife a $40 million advance on a movie or biography. That's why. I would play right to their well-earned cynicism about who gets ahead and who gets left behind, getting the shaft. That's exactly what I explained. And that's why I would do a tax bill focused on exactly what Donald Trump wanted to do, but the Republicans refused to. And I go right to that millionaire. Say they could have paid more and you would have gotten more. But you're getting less because they had to walk out with more. And the system is rigged against you. And Donald Trump just doubled down on its own corruption. And you know, and I know, Amy, because we've gone over all the polling, we've gone over all the focus groups. The public, doesn't matter what income group, race, background, part of the country, urban, rural, etc., they rightfully have concluded the system is rigged. I get the term, and this is not for me to, I get the term oligarch. I just don't think it's the most conversant term out there. It's a rigged system on behalf of the wealthy.
Well, that actually leads me directly to this question about where Democrats go from here, which is in using the term, whether it's using the term oligarchy or not.
Yeah, that's just, I agree with the general critique, so don't worry about it.
But what the AOC and Bernie Sanders messaging is really focused on is exactly that the system's broken, the system is rigged, the system is not here to help us, that Donald Trump is not the problem in and of himself. He is a product of this broken system. And that seems to be resonating with Democratic voters, but sort of across a broader spectrum. So that leads me to my question for you, which is this now who the Democratic Party is? It's going to look a lot more like AOC and a lot less like the governors and senators who have traditionally been the faces of the Democratic Party.
Well, that's how the primary process will select who we think is the best for that choice in 2028. First of all and foremost, 2026 is all about them and a referendum. Now, second, look, I agree with the critique. You and I have discussed this. You know my view. The American dream and our politics became unstable as soon as the American dream became unaffordable. And you can't have a system and a country where the Emanuel children are going to be okay. They're going to get a shot at the American dream on their own, stand on their own 2 feet. But everybody else's kids are going to get the shaft. And the moment you have people owning 4, 5, 6 homes and people can't afford a starting home, the moment you were supposed to get it in healthcare, you were supposed to get a second opinion, and that wasn't supposed to be the insurance bureaucrat on the other side of the phone saying you can't get that procedure, or your 401k was supposed to be your savings retirement, but you're using it to cover where your paycheck doesn't cover. And I can keep going down the list. That was the structure of the American dream. Yeah, Democrats versus Republicans, etc. But basically, people agreed with it, and it was American dream because Americans had access to it. They had a shot at it. You're down now to just basically 10% of the kids in this country having a shot at it because their parents can do everything and help them pave the way in a way that wasn't true 20 years ago. And the rest of the 90%, they graduate college, they live in the basement until they're 35 with $30,000 worth of debt. The kids are staying on their healthcare system all the way to 26 because their place of employment doesn't have it. They have to get a premium support. And mom and dad are taking money out of their savings just to make ends meet and to have grandma upstairs and the kids downstairs. And to me, that's what's wrong. And they have every right to think that everybody in Washington is feeding at the trough and they're left not only behind, but they're left paying the bill for it. And the system, the critique of that is correct, which is why I think there's more consensus between, quote unquote, the moderates and progressives in the party about the critique of the system. Now, we may disagree. I created free community college, first city ever to do it in the city of Chicago. Got to be earned to be average. You get free community college. We did free pre-K, free kindergarten, raised the minimum wage. The critique, there's a consensus. The truth is minor adjustments on what it takes to restore not only the dream, the access to the dream, but the confidence of the dream and that people have a shot. And it's not wrong. We wanted to, they didn't want to guarantee. They just didn't want the shaft. And not only that, and this gets to a part where there is a disagreement, which is we got caught up in a slew of issues and acted like on a whole set of the cultural train that we were not focused on what mattered most to families. We were focused on these tangential issues. And, as somebody in 2016, I dealt with bathroom access issue. I just didn't make it my identity. I made graduations rates and college attendance the focus. We dealt with it. It just wasn't a myopic obsession that I think drowned out and did not permit a space for a set of things when you take education. We're at a 30-year low on reading level attainment, 30-year low on math scores. That's the focus of a school, not what's the name on the front of it and who goes what access to what bathroom.
But Rahm, don't you think that part of the challenge, more than whether the cultural piece, is the fact that Democrats are the defenders now of institutions, that Donald Trump became the guy who's going to go and disrupt, and Democrats said, no, norms, standards, institutions, can't break those. And now
I get Amy, if we find ourselves, and he's trying to do this, that consistently over all these battlefronts pick and choose to only be seen as the party that defends and restores what was missed, that's a mistake. We have to be the party that advocates a series of reforms and changes because the system wasn't working. People did not believe. And if we become that, and he's trying to make us defend every piece, and I get the instincts, we have to pick and choose, which is why I don't mean to come back to this like a Johnny One Note. The ethics thing is change. And it's changed to his status quo. The reason I want to take on the entire ethics package is it deals with the Supreme Court, it deals with and it should be self-inflicted. We got Bob Menendez as a Democratic senator. We should be all about ethics reform to the legislative, executive. Nobody is going to be left untouched, and we're not going to accept the status quo. And the reason I'm also for this is because this airplane for Donald Trump is what Donald Rumsfeld was for George Bush. He is going to defend this. He's not going to give it up. And he becomes the new status quo, the new defender of not the institution, but the right to have a plane. And we become, the change agents. That is unacceptable.
Rahm, in order to...
I think, Amy, it's you're Mr. Ambassador. I don't think it's...
Mr.
Amy.
Ambassador. The issue for Democrats on these cultural issues, all right?
Yeah.
Does this require a repudiation of those positions? Because you can argue, as some have, Governor Newsom says, let's just not talk about it. I want to talk about schools. I don't want to talk about bathrooms. I want to talk about jobs. I don't want to get distracted. But you have to answer the question, what do you think about this issue? Should trans athletes be able to participate in sports? Should these certain rules apply to certain groups?
Well,
do Democrats have to come out and have an actual definitive answer that breaks with the assumption that Democrats are always going to stand up for this one position?
Yeah, Aim, look, I've said this before in the press, so we're by our DNA and appropriately a party of acceptance. Now, I'm in Japan, but I look at 2024, 2023, and we became an advocate party, not an acceptance party. We were advocating, and which is why the American people concluded not only did we care about these tangentials, we cared more about these other secondary issues more than we cared about a primary issue. And it drowned out, and screaming at your top of your lungs about kitchen table issues is not going to work when they think you are off kilter and you've made a priority of a bunch of secondary, and I say secondary, not me, but issues that don't touch everybody's everyday life. They just don't. Now, let me also, since we're mixing midterms, presidentials, if they're saying they're not, on the presidential level pre-2028, fast forward, if you look at President Obama, President Clinton, now again, I'm a product of those experiences, but even go to history with Kennedy. Kennedy goes to Texas to address the issue of being a Catholic president by saying, I'll be a president who's Catholic, not a Catholic man. I won't take direction from the Pope. We shortchanged it, but President Clinton at that time, post Mondale and Dukakis and Jimmy Carter, he not only deals with welfare as we know it, which was 40% of his advertising, but he also deals with quote unquote Sister Soldier at the Rodney King violence where she was advocating at that time, and does it in I think at a push conference. I'm not a church. Okay. President Obama not only deals with fatherhood, parenting, but also then Pastor Wright, his own pastor, and is very clear. All of them not only taking on the cultural terrain, but more importantly, showing a quality of character of strength, which is essential for the executive branch. So I don't know if it's just repudiation, but it is being clear on a slew of issues that you're anchored, I use this generically, in the mainstream. And if you're the critique of 2023, 2024, even coming out of 2020, some of the things that we were talking about, the way we talked about, the terms we used to describe, whether it was defund the police, Latinx, birthing person, I can go down the list. We were culturally out of the mainstream. Every successful Democratic president, who also Clinton and Obama being the only two reelected since Roosevelt, anchored themselves in the mainstream culturally, which I believe was an essential permission slip to get the rest of the agenda and the economic piece. If you are off kilter on a piece, or more importantly, the broad piece of the cultural set of issues, I don't care how loud you scream about economic issues. The public that is important in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania. I'm not talking about the Upper West Side of New York, and I'm not talking about Bel Air in LA. You want to go into parts of Wisconsin, and you want to, whether it's Kenosha or Racine or up in Green Bay, and you want to go to Erie, Pennsylvania, Scranton, etc. You got to be able where people feel like you understand their lives and you understand their challenges. This is why one of the reasons I've talked about national service and a commitment. I've talked about focusing on the classroom, not on the locker room or the bathroom. You've got to anchor yourself. Now, there will be something, our nominee and or Democrats running in the primary, and it's not to gratuitously reverse what you said before if that was your position, but you have to for not just political reasons. I think the American people have read the party right about 2024. We just looked out on a tangent and as if that was a priority when it wasn't. Not a priority for all Americans.
Yeah, not to make this, again, all about 2006, but to me, when I talk to folks about that election, that is probably the most dramatic change between that election and now was you were most successful in places where Democrats can't win now, southern Indiana and southeast Ohio, and the least successful in suburban Chicago and suburban Philadelphia and suburban Connecticut. And so I do think that that is part of the challenge for Democrats is the places they are doing the best are actually the places where this cultural movement is enjoyed and is celebrated. And the places they've lost are the places where Democrats used to win.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's again 10,000 feet, and I am not all, for the Democrats, not all 50 states are equal, and not all districts are equal. Only a certain amount of districts make up a majority. It's just a fact. I get back to this. I remember when we were recruiting, and so we had a bunch of candidates in front of the caucus, and there's like 10 of them. And without naming names, a couple of members started privately yelling at me. These aren't real Democrats. We had
pro-gun,
CIA. We also had sheriffs. We had football players. We had small business owners. Yeah, we had state senators also, but we had people who culturally opened up 5% more of the electorate because their biography made the voters in their district comfortable. Okay. And I just said to them, first of all, they're running under the Democratic banner. Second of all, they're going to give you a gavel. And the gavel's the same size, whether it's 32 or 16 votes. And third, they're going to vote for Nancy Pelosi for speaker. And they signed on to the 606. I don't know what else you want. You couldn't get elected in their district, and they probably couldn't get elected in your district. But I don't know. All of America's here. And so I look at this and I say, if you want to get to a majority, not all districts are equal. And you have to recruit in this time people that have a biography that works in that district from a cultural standpoint. And at 06, with gas prices, the beginning of the recession, housing, people that struggle, which is why minimum wage was first on that 6 and 06, and their biography on national security, etc. That was, again, remember, 06 was 04 after John Kerry was for the war before he was against the war, sailing, etc. That was an essential down payment. That answered and allowed whatever of the 30 guys and men and women that won, that allowed a whole part of their electorate to kind of go like this. What did he say? And listen to him. And the biography was not only their introduction, it was an essential sales point. And it also helped us close the sale in those districts. And it produced the first woman speaker. And it produced the last time we raised the minimum wage. So I kind of the goal is to win. It shouldn't be so hard. And a classic example, last week I was at an event and I saw the speaker of the Virginia House. Very interesting guy, but that's a side point. Very interesting person. He's got a 51-49 control, 2 seats. There are 9 seats in Virginia that Kamala Harris won, but is held by a Republican. Now, we're going to win the governor's race if you look at the data today. The difference between a 55-45 and a 51-49 of what you can and can't do and get passed from an agenda on healthcare or a whole host of other subjects is massive. And so to me, being strategic, I would say in Virginia right now, while there's 100 seats, 9 are more important than any other of the 100.
Right. All right. Last question for you, which is
U.S. history for 200.
You can. I will put it on the board, but that's not the right one. So you are everywhere. You're on podcasts, you're on TV shows, you're on late night. Am I going to see you in Iowa? Am I going to see you in South Carolina?
Am I going to see you in my dreams? Am I having bad dreams? I'm a nightmare.
What's the goal here?
Look, first of all, a couple things. One is, as an ambassador, you can't comment or do anything about politics. Now I got close to a couple of, so I was locked up in the attic, and I got a lot to say. And second, I'm not sitting in the back of Thelma and Louise's car anymore, letting them drive over the cliff at 90 miles an hour. Not doing it. I got something to say. If minimum, if I do, I bring my party back to being grounded, so we don't do this again and get the consequences of Donald Trump. Yeah, I'm gonna use my voice. And third, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and I can give you the standard, which is I'm hoping public service is not done with me because I'm not done with it, and I got something I want to say. That said, like any athlete, I'm in training. Don't know whether I'm going to make the Olympic team, but I'm in training.
Those are 3 pretty good answers.
Which one do you like the most, so I could road test it for the next time?
I mean,
I will tell you this. I was locked up, and I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like, come on. And you can't say anything.
Did you just scream into a pillow? Did you write stuff down? How did you deal with being muzzled a little bit?
I called a number of friends and did, scream therapy.
Okay.
I did the Edward Monk's scream.
Yes, that was.
But it was like, and you're not allowed to do anything and say anything or be, I took my energy out on China and Xi and Putin. But the other thing is, and again, I want to be, I loved the work and I loved the project of being ambassador to Japan. The other thing is, I get some stuff right. I get some stuff wrong. I am not sitting in the back seat with Thelma and Louise going right towards the cliff and say, hit the gas. No way. And I'm going to speak up so the party doesn't do this. And if I can do it, and if I can affect the outcome, in that way, then I'm going to do it. And as to my deal, personal, I care about a number of things, but the focus, as I think I've written and talked about, not just what's wrong on Senate education. Here's what I would do to fix it on reading and math and high school graduation. I just did a piece on why I think we need to restore national service and require everybody to do 6 months because rights come with responsibilities. I'm going to lay out what I think is an important kind of down payment on restoring the American dream. And if I'm comfortable that that's my niche, I have what I think is the answer to not only the country's main problem, and I really do believe in this observation, critique, analysis. The moment the American dream not only becomes unaffordable, but the system feels rigged, is exactly the time, like on a spectrum, exactly the time that our politics becomes unstable. So the unaffordability of the American dream and the instability of our politics are directly linked. And to me, that should be the central critique, the central focus, and the central agenda.
Well, Ambassador, Mayor, Congressman.
Shithead, as according to my wife.
I don't think we're allowed to say that here, but that's fine.
I did.
It's
a self-referential point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
So much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to The Odd Years. If you liked what you heard or want to make a suggestion, leave us a review or recommend us to a friend. You're our best way to get the word out about what we do. And if you want more from the Cook Political Report, consider becoming a subscriber. Go to cookpolitical.com/subscribe. Listeners can use the discount code ODD10, that's ODD, the number 10, to save 10% on any subscription. This offer is available only to new subscribers. The Odd Years is brought to you by the Cook Political Report and is produced by Becca Kaufman.